Hi, everyone. I am Kristen Goss, founder and owner of KWG Family Legal and Mediation Services. We are your knowledgeable, warm, and gracious attorneys. Thank you for tuning in. This is going to be a great journey. We are Civility Wins, Family Law Edition. We will be bringing on different guests throughout. Special needs consultants or educational consultants talking about children with special needs. We will be talking about the collaborative law process and bringing on other professionals discussing things such as asset protection for business owners and just providing education for those out there who are in need. We are here to promote civility in the professional arena, and we look forward to having you in this journey with us. Welcome back to another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. I am your host, Kristen Goss, and I am here with two of my favorites, my friends. We have Britney. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, but we have Britney, we have Tabitha here, and we're going to talk about a really niche area of the law. But before we get to that, I would like for them both to introduce themselves. So I'll start with you, Britney.
Yes, I'm Britney Penah Herrera. I am an attorney in Tampa, Florida. I practice exclusively in family law. I am self-describing myself as a holistic divorce attorney, and I am collaboratively trained.
Awesome.
And I'm Tabitha Mrai. I've been in the field of education. My background is in exceptional education, and I've been collaboratively trained since 2020.
Awesome. So collaboratively trained, what is that? And so that's what we're going to talk about today, the collaborative law process. And I just have to backtrack a little bit because I am an attorney, and prior to going to law school, it was this whole thing that, okay, you're going to have to go to court, you're going to have to fight, you're going to have to litigate. And I even concentrated in litigation, actually, in law school because I just thought that that's what attorneys needed to do. But I always wanted to help families. My mom was a social worker, my dad was a pastor, and that's what really prompted me to want to be a family law attorney. Of course, I like rules, laws, procedures, all of that. So family law is what made sense. But I did not know about the collaborative law process until 2020. And when I got collaboratively trained, it was like night and day. And I'm like, this is exactly what I am called to do. Like, this is how me personally as an attorney would like to help families. And so we're going to get to that about the collaborative law process. It's something that is not new. In general, it's been around since 1990. It started out in Minnesota. In Florida, where all of us are located, it was an actual statute that passed in 2017. So there's a whole statute about the collaborative law process. It's also, I believe, in California. There are not all of the states have, opted into the collaborative law process, but it's in a lot of states and also internationally. So we're going to get a little bit nitty gritty into the details of this collaborative law process because we want all of the viewers out there to know that it is another option to traditional litigation. So when you want to go through a divorce or paternity action, you don't have to just say, okay, I'm going to file in court. There are other options. Most people know about mediation also as another option, but this is an alternative to both traditional litigation and mediation. So I want to start with you, Britney, to kind of go a little bit more in detail about the collaborative law process and what it entails.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So one of the things that is important about the collaborative divorce process is it's a way to handle all of your issues privately, confidentially, and not to involve a judge and not have someone else make decisions on behalf of your family without knowing anything about you. And it's really taking that control back and saying, hey, we need to, kind of go behind closed doors and take some time and resolve things amicably, respectfully. Everybody needs to be heard, and let's tailor a plan and an agreement that works best for our family. And so that's really the heart and goal of collaborative divorce. What makes it look a little different, right? There's a few things, but the first thing is the participation agreement. That agreement is required. At least in Florida, it's required. So you have to sign this agreement stating that you agree to be fully transparent, that you agree to not withhold any information, that means you're providing all the financials, you're providing everything absolutely necessary in the process so you can make all the decisions that need to be made, whether it's on behalf of your children, your estate, or things like that. So you have to have full transparency. In addition, it, like I said, it is confidential, so a judge is not going to come into your collaborative law process and really kind of know how things kind of work themselves out, which is nice. So there is a confidentiality piece where nothing that you're doing in your collaborative divorce process is taken, essentially before the judge until you have your final agreement, which is really nice. So the last thing that's really important to know about the participation agreement is the disqualification clause. That means if your collaborative process, for whatever reason, just can't come to an agreement, or maybe a full agreement, you could come to a partial agreement, and you decide, I need to take my issue before a judge, and I can't settle things as a team outside of this process, then that's fine. You can do that. I haven't had a case end up in that position yet, but if that were to happen, the attorney that's representing you in the collaborative divorce process cannot continue on with you to represent you in now contested court litigation. So both attorneys would now be disqualified. You would have to find completely new attorneys, start over, and anything produced or worked on and created during that collaborative process would be kept in that process. You can't take it on before a judge. So you lose some of that and you really have to start over. And that we do that primarily because we want to foster true integrity in the process, that everybody can come to the table and be vulnerable, transparent, but we really hope that all agreements are settled in the process.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of settling, just so you know, the statistics say 80 or over 80% of collaborative law process matters end in full resolution. So nothing is left on the table. You don't have to go to court to outline or address anything that is left not resolved. So that's a good thing. Yeah. Okay.
So I think the next step is, what does it look like, right? So we know what are some of the elements to it, but what does it look like? There's different models. So at your just core, in Florida, you're required to have two attorneys represent you in a collaborative divorce process. So both you and your spouse, or if it's not your spouse because you're not married and it's a paternity action, then the other co-parent. So both parties have to agree to this process, and both attorneys. So at a minimum, you have two attorneys who have signed on to the participation agreement. That's one model. That's the two-attorney model. That's your most basic, fundamental model. But then outside of that, we can scale up a team to meet the needs of your family. So there's different ways we can add professionals throughout the process, but the next most common model is what we call a full team. And in a full team model, you'll have a mental health facilitator. Their job is really to navigate the entire process. They're a neutral position. They don't represent either one party. And they help ensure that communication is going well. They're ensuring that we are staying on topic and we're being mindful of everybody. But they can also resolve conflicts, whether between the parties or between professionals. Sometimes that happens. I see two attorneys get into it all the time. And so that person's role usually has a fundamental background in psychology, therapy. Usually they're licensed therapists. They have a whole gamut of different credentials, but their role is really not to do therapy in the process, but it's really to take that fundamental background, right, and bring it to the process so that we have really healthy communication in place for this family. The other role that we'll bring in is called a financial neutral, and the financial neutral can be a CPA or other, credentialing backgrounds, but they'll really take a deep dive into your finances. They'll run your child support calculations, your alimony calculations, your lifestyle analysis. They'll, and at the very end of it, they'll build a spreadsheet of what does, kind of the financial, landscape of your family look like. And their role is really great. They do a ton of math. They love Excel. They're very pivotal in the process. And then outside of that full team, we can bring in other, we call allied professionals. So some families have other needs. You could have a family come in and they have a huge, legacy estate and multiple trusts or multiple properties, businesses, right? And so you might have to bring in a special trust attorney. You might have to bring in just various other roles depending on the needs of the family. One very common role that we often have to bring in is an allied professional on behalf of children who may have some special needs, right? And so those are addressed in the process, but we acknowledge what the needs of the family is, and as a team we talk about who else do we need to bring into the process to best suit the conversations that are going on for this family, for all members of the family, right? So every member of that family has a voice, and so that's a conversation you should have with your team on who to bring to the table at all times.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because as an attorney, when I'm in court and I'm litigating, I've come across special needs often. And let's take, for example, a case that I had. You had an autistic young girl, 4 years old. Her parents are going through a divorce. They're in different areas of the state of Florida, maybe 2 hours apart. The transition and, the going back and forth is a lot for any child. But then to top it all off, someone who has or may have autistic, who may be autistic, it makes it like on a whole nother level. And you're bringing in all of these experts, one expert for mom, one expert for dad, to counter each other, and, social investigations and guardian ad litems. And it's not only costly, but at the end of the day, my heart bleeds, because you have this child's needs that are being overlooked, because in a litigated setting, oftentimes, to nobody's real fault, because it is an emotional, battle. It's emotional. It's traumatizing for the parents. It's traumatizing for the child or the children. But as the attorney, as the professional representing the parents, it's our duty to say, hey, have a conversation with the parents. How is this going to benefit you? How is this going to benefit your child? But oftentimes that doesn't happen in a litigated setting. But in the collaborative law process, as Britney indicated, we can bring on these allied professionals, and the whole process is totally different. So Tabitha, our educational consultant, we have her here. Thank you for coming back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I want you to share with the viewers again what an educational consultant does, but then also how can you see from your expertise and your experience how representing or working with families who have children with special needs can be different in a collaborative setting.
So I'll start by just talking a little bit about what an educational consultant is, and then I'll explain how it falls into the world of collaborative. So an educational consultant basically means that, a consultant is somebody who gives advice on a specific area of a specialty they may have, right? So in my case, it's the field of education. So whether I'm working with a school or with a family or with professionals, the idea is to give insight into the world of education and help whoever it is to navigate that the world of education or the field of education. So sometimes it's working with schools to meet the needs of diverse learners. Sometimes it's working with the families to teach them how to advocate for their child. And so that's kind of been my world and my journey through the field of education on an international level, here in Florida, different states, Brazil, Israel. But in 2020, I was introduced to the world of collaborative, and at first I thought, how do I fit into this process, right? And my collaborative team and some wonderful professionals in there invited me to just give a presentation on this concept of special needs, pretty much like the case you're describing. And I realized that in my 20-something years in the field of education, I had several families that went through litigation, and I watched from the side of the children, and I watched how that impacted the child's development. And of course, it impacts any child and it impacts any family. It is a traumatic experience. It's considered, one of, top of adverse events that can happen in a child's life that impacts several areas of a child's development. But when you're talking about a child with special needs, and I mentioned that my background is in exceptional education, because exceptional education doesn't just refer to children that have a disability in a certain area. It could really run the gamut, in terms of what exceptionality that child has. I really watched how these families that were going through litigation, it was ripping these families apart, and how that was so detrimental to the children's development. I saw regression. I saw families that just couldn't even make decisions about what their child needed because they couldn't be in the same room at the same time. Or in order to make decisions, sometimes it took months because several emails had to go out, copies of everything, 2 separate rooms, sometimes not even be on campus at the same time. And my office, when I was in leadership and education, often became like a therapeutic place. I actually had a friend who was a therapist, and she would volunteer at the school once a week to try and help these families just even get through the process. So definitely when I heard about collaborative, I drank the Kool-Aid, because I was like, this is what, all educators need to know about this. And when I heard about the opportunity of becoming an allied professional and actually being able to be part of the process in some way, I was in 100%. Like you said, like this is what I was called for. I really felt like it made total sense how I could help these families, that I felt that I had a boundary, that I really couldn't help them further than what I did, and this allowed that support for sure. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to understand that for families of children with special needs, when you go into litigation, you no longer have control of what the decisions that are going to be made. In collaborative, like you were explaining, Brittany, you get to make that decision yourself. So you hold control of that. And that's really important, because the expectation is that this judge in these few sessions are going to completely understand your child's needs, the journey that you've been through with your child and still have to go through. And then somehow in the midst of all these, like what you were describing, professionals, and I bring a professional that says something different than your professional, is somehow going to make an educated decision about what this child needs, right? Like the likelihood of that being a positive outcome is slim to none, right? Whereas in collaborative, you get to make that decision together. And there's a recognition in this case that you're describing that sometimes the journey is just beginning, right? You're describing a child that's 4 years old. A child is officially diagnosed with autism at the age of 5. So while there's definitely things and there's markers in development that are red flags, and certainly things and early interventions that can happen, the official diagnosis is not going to happen till age 5. So this family's journey is just beginning, right? So there should have already been in place early interventions. You're talking about a child that maybe is nonverbal. So there definitely should have been training for the family, a team put together. But if they're in the midst of divorce and they're in the midst of fighting, that's not going to happen, right? The children are not going to be front and center. And the collaborative process allows that to be front and center, and for us to bring in an allied professional that will help the family kind of navigate, like, how do we make these decisions, and what needs to come into place, and how do we put a parenting plan that takes into consideration, that's not a copy paste, and takes into consideration the specific needs of this particular family and this particular child and where they are in the journey, and then how do we come back to the table to make really important decisions that are going to come up further down the road.
Wow, that was beautiful. I love it. Is there anything else that you want to add, Brittany?
No, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I think the work is beautiful. I mean, obviously no one wants divorce, right? Okay, so we're not celebrating that, but what I think collaborative does celebrate is the coming together to say, this family has really, unique needs that we need to tailor their plan or their agreement, and help them build the foundation of how are we going to co-parent long term together? Because you don't stop co-parenting at 18, like the law says, right? And if your kids have these needs, we have to address them for life, right? And we have to get together as a team now. And if you're choosing the collaborative process, you're already saying that I don't want a judge to step in and make decisions on behalf of my family, because we all know that they're not going to be the best decisions, but let's prioritize our kids, put our differences aside, right? And figure out a way to honor everybody in this family together still, right? Because you're not walking away from your kids. You're not, and that really starts with choosing a process that's going to represent how you want to co-parent long term. And so by saying, I don't want to litigate, is saying, hey kids, mom and dad may not be in the same home anymore, or it could be any type of spouse. So it could be, two parents just saying, we're not going to be under the same roof anymore, but that doesn't mean mom and dad, I keep saying mom and dad, I'm sorry. That doesn't mean the parents aren't going to show up to soccer or, do events together long term, right? And so definitely when you have, a child that has a need that is very specific, and I just want to hone on this part too, is the need doesn't have to be a disability. It doesn't have to be something that's negative, because we all know that autism is a beautiful thing. They're often actually super intelligent, and they just have to get it out in different ways, right? But also on the other spectrum, what if you have a child who is extremely gifted intellectually and they are just scoring off the charts, right? And so you might need a plan that's specific to that child.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, or what if they're just a fabulous football player and they're getting, different deals and offers, or they have extreme music abilities, right? So whatever it could be, it could just be, something specific to them, someone else we can have brought into the process to really hone in on what does this family need? Let's identify that, and let's build everything around those needs to tailor it to them. You're never going to get that if you choose to go the litigated route.
Right. And the allied professional can come in for a specific piece of the process, right? It doesn't have to be part of the full team, like you mentioned, throughout the entire process, because sometimes what comes up is, well, that sounds very costly, right? So that also is an important piece. But I think that the point you made, Britney, is so important, and it could be a medical need, right? Maybe it doesn't have to do with education at all, or maybe it's a social or emotional need. Maybe it's a need that's for a given amount of time, and then won't be needed in the future. But whatever it is, the idea is that to engage the family in this collaboration already teaches them what that first step can look like as their family turns into, it looks a little bit different, but it gives them that first step into, how am I going to communicate in the future? How am I going to come back to the table and make these important decisions, as opposed to pitting them against each other, leaving completely wrecked through the process, and not being able to sit down, sometimes even to look at each other again. So even just engaging in the process of collaborative, I think, is a great first step for the family.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining me as we talked about the collaborative process. What does that entail? That's another option and an alternative to traditional litigation, in addition to mediation and other opportunities that families have. And as an attorney, I am bound by my ethics and the Florida bar and just the value systems that I know Britney has the same value system in this respect. We are supposed to, and we're mandated by law to provide all of the options that are available to families, not just the traditional litigation. So this is an alternative to traditional litigation that a lot of people may not know. So we want to make sure that our viewers out there are aware that there is a collaborative law process. And for more information, you can always look us up before we end, I do want Britney and Tabitha to share with the viewers where they can find you if they wanted further information, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with you, Britney.
Yes. So right now, I am an attorney with Greenspoon Martyr.
Okay.
So I have my own consulting company, and you can find me on my website, tabithasm.com.
Awesome. So, yeah, if you want to have further information or reach out to any of these ladies, please feel free to do so. Thank you again to all the viewers out there for watching another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. I am Kristen Goss. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe if you love what you hear, especially what you heard today. We would appreciate it. Thank you, and we will be in touch. See you at the next episode. Hi again, I'm Kristen Goss. I am the founder and owner of KWG, Family Legal and Mediation Services. We are your knowledgeable, warm, and gracious attorneys. Thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. See you next time.